Hey there everyone, welcome to Crypt Finder. A couple of months ago, I made a video all about 8 underrated psychological thrillers that I thought they have a lot of just inherent tension in them. They've got some really interesting twists and reveals, just very compelling watches. And that video was, a lot of people really, really loved it. And so I thought, okay, let's do a part 2 of that. So I wanted to bring you 10 more really intriguing psychological thrillers. This is a totally subjective list, by the way. You may or may not agree with some of the ones on here, but I will also tell you, I don't go out on the web and I'm just looking for just odd, unusual things to create a video. Every single one of these I absolutely love, and I would defend to the end that I think they are truly great psychological thrillers. So now some viewers have told me I'm giving away too much. So believe me, I'm not. I'm trying to be pretty vague here. There are no spoilers whatsoever. I'm trying to give you just enough to sort of wet your whistle, to determine if this is something you want to watch or something maybe you want to avoid altogether. So think of it as just the very rudimentary sort of basic plot points that I'm covering here. Okay, enough about all of that. Let's get to it. Coming in at number 10 is Apartment Zero from 1988. This film is far enough removed from its release date that even if you saw it back at that time, my guess is it might have faded in your memory. So I'm more than happy to drag it out, dust it off, and help you rediscover this film. And if you've never heard of this movie before, you're in for quite a treat because this is a very effective thriller. Granted, it might not be for everyone, but Apartment Zero is both a Hitchcockian thriller and also a dark character study. Set against the backdrop of a politically unstable Buenos Aires, Apartment Zero is an atmospheric, slow-burn psychological thriller that really is about loneliness and obsession and identity. The story follows Adrian Leduc, who's played by a very young Colin Firth here. He's a reclusive British expatriate who operates a rundown cinema that specializes in showing old Hollywood classics, and he lives alone in an old apartment building. Isolated and emotionally stunted, Adrian really has trouble connecting to the world around him. And as a way of bringing in a little bit of additional income, he decides to rent out his room to a very charismatic American named Jack Carney, who's played by Hart Bochner. Bochner is actually the son of actor Lloyd Bochner, and he was in movies like Die Hard, very memorable there. He was also in Supergirl and Rich and Famous, among others, and this is strictly just my own opinion here. I get the feeling that sometimes his extreme good looks might have gotten in the way of some of the roles that he ended up taking because he never really got to show off some of his real acting chops, and here in this movie, he does an amazing job. Jack is outgoing, effortlessly charming, the opposite of Adrian, and soon Jack wins over the neighbors. He inserts himself into the community, and for Adrian, Jack becomes kind of a surrogate friend and the object of an unspoken fascination. But unsettling questions begin to surface about Jack's past, his real motives for being in Argentina. There's also a series of political murders going on, and if that sounds boring, it's not. This is a gripping thriller, and Colin Firth is equally great, as you would expect, from a future Oscar-winning actor. He really throws himself into the role. So if this description is piquing your interest, this one might be for you. This was directed by Martin Donovan, not the American actor Martin Donovan, but the Argentinian writer and director, who actually also co-wrote not only this film, but Death Becomes Her from 1992 as well. The film fuses elements of psychological suspense with political intrigue. There's also a homoerotic subtext going on. It creates a very uneasy, claustrophobic mood as secrets unravel. The line between dependency and menace blurs, leading to A pretty haunting conclusion. Number 9 is In Fear from 2013. This is a British psychological thriller that transforms a pretty simple scenario. You've got a couple just lost on some rural roads and turns it into a very chilling ordeal. I might be just a little bit biased here because if I'm being perfectly honest, I am so directionally challenged. I get lost in my own neighborhood. So maybe this one has a little extra appeal for me. The story follows Tom, played by Ian DeCasticker, and Lucy, played by Alice Englert, a young couple driving to a remote hotel in the Irish countryside to celebrate their new budding relationship. Finding themselves alone on a winding lane that seems to lead to nowhere is a very minimal concept, but terrifying. If you've ever been lost, it's getting dark and the GPS isn't working, or it can't lock onto a location, there's no one to ask, then maybe you'll get a good sense of what that can do to a person. What begins as mild frustration soon spirals into complete panic because the road signs begin to contradict each other, and every loop that they make seems to bring them back to the exact same location. And as night falls and the isolation deepens, they begin to realize that, they might not be lost. Someone might deliberately be toying with them. Strange symbols appear on the road, their car is tampered with, they get glimpses of a figure lurking in the darkness, all fueling their growing dread. This was directed by Jeremy Lovering. In Fear, it's a low-budget, stripped-down, claustrophobic movie, relying much more on atmosphere and psychological tension than any kind of elaborate set pieces. This movie was panned by a lot of people, and I never really understood why, because I find it pretty gripping. The movie is able to sustain a real sense of mounting paranoia here, to the point where you're not really sure where the terror is coming from. Is it an external threat or from the couple's own unraveling trust of each other? With naturalistic performances and a kind of raw improvisational feel to it, In Fear is definitely an underrated psychological thriller that shows how quickly fear can erode rationality and how isolation can become a trap in and of itself. Coming in at number 8 is Alexandra's Project from 2003. This is a tense, unsettling psychological thriller from Australia. Alexandra's Project is a story of domestic life turned suddenly and shockingly upside down. The film follows Steve, who's played by Gary Sweet. He's a suburban office worker who comes home on his birthday expecting a celebration from his wife, Alexandra, and his children, but instead he finds the house dark and he's alone, except for a videotape left on the television. When Steve plays the tape, Alexandra begins to deliver a message that quickly shifts into something more disturbing. Over the course of the night, the video unfolds into a revelation of secrets and grievances and painful truths. Steve watches trapped and powerless. You'll have to watch the movie to find out why, but he's really forced to confront his own actions and some of the hidden tensions within their marriage. The video becomes a methodical, merciless, psychological game that forces him to question everything. Yes, I'm being intentionally vague. This was directed by Rolf de Heer. Alexandra's Project is low budget, minimal in setting, but it packs an emotional wallop, unfolding almost entirely within the confines of the couple's suburban home. It's an unsettling exploration of resentment and revenge. Don't expect a slick film here with amazing cinematography, because that's not what you're getting. If you went outside right now to check your mail and there was a tiger sitting on your porch, that would throw you off, right? This film does the exact same thing. It's lean, it's unconventional. It had me guessing where it was going at every single step along the way. It had me guessing how it would ultimately end, and I've never forgotten it. Number 7 is Dogtooth from 2009. This is a disturbing, darkly satirical, completely original film. It's a Greek psychological drama about control, indoctrination, and, let's call it perception. The story focuses on an unnamed family that live on a sprawling, isolated estate with a high fence surrounding the entire property. The parents have kept their adult children, one son and two daughters, completely isolated from the outside world for their entire lives. Within this bizarre household, everything has been carefully manipulated. Even language, words are redefined. The word see actually refers to an armchair, and the children are taught to fear the world beyond the fence. They are told that they cannot leave the property until their dog tooth falls out. It's kind of a milestone, but feels very much like a MacGuffin and something that will never really happen. To maintain this closed system, the father occasionally brings in an outsider for strictly controlled encounters, but any contact with the external world is limited. As the children grow older, their curiosity, their frustrations, their instincts begin to push back against some of these boundaries, and the tension escalates. Little cracks begin to appear in the parents' absolute control, leading to some unpredictable and unsettling consequences. This is directed by Yorgos Lanthimos before he made a splash with movies like The Lobster and The Favorite and Poor Things. It's known for its deadpan tone, the sort of clinical style to it, and also the weird, surreal logic. It's very provocative, though, and it presents how reality can be shaped and warped by authority figures. At number 6 is Mrs. Soffel from 1984. This one might seem like a strange choice for psychological thrillers, and if you wanted to argue that, I won't disagree with you. I'm not going to die on that particular hill because, yeah, this is more like a kind of dark romance with a little bit of crime thrown in here, but it's also a really haunting psychological film, and I just love it, and I don't have another place to put it on a ranking, so here we go. This is set in turn-of-the-century Pittsburgh. It's inspired by true events. The story follows Kate Soffel, who's played by Diane Keaton. She's a pious, dutiful wife of the warden, who's played by Edward Herrmann, overseeing Allegheny Prison in Pennsylvania. Part of her charitable work involves reading the Bible to inmates at the jail, and during her visits, she becomes drawn to Ed Biddle, who's played by Mel Gibson, a very charismatic, intelligent man. He's a convicted murderer awaiting execution, along with his brother Jack, played by Matthew Modine. What begins as spiritual guidance soon deepens into a much more emotional attachment, and then into an affair that really defies everything that Kate has built her life around. Now torn between her loyalty to her family and her overwhelming desire, Kate is forced to confront her own repressed yearnings and the suffocating constraints of her very respectable life. This is directed by Gillian Armstrong. Mrs. Soffel is both a romantic thriller and a character study, steeped in a lot of meticulous period detail, and the film explores themes of desire and guilt and the cost of defying societal expectations, all anchored by very sensitive performances here by Keaton and Gibson and a very oppressive, melancholy atmosphere. Edward Herrmann and Terry O'Quinn both co-star here. They're both very good, and I think you might be more inclined to enjoy this one if you like darker romance films, because the actual thriller part of this, it's pretty low-key. But the psychological implications of Kate's choices and how much manipulation lies behind the Biddles and what Kate knows versus what she doesn't know, that's what's really fascinating. Okay, I admit, I have a real soft spot for this one. I saw it back in 1984, and I always really, really loved it. I've rewatched it many times over the years. It's the haunting atmosphere to it. It's the performances, and also the love story in there as well. And I think that it has enough of sort of the dark psychological feels, though, for it, that I think it still fits pretty nicely in this ranking. At number 5 is The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover from 1989. I don't know how many descriptive words I can jam into this one little review to truly convey what this movie is like, but I'm going to try. It is visually very stunning, very lavish. It also is psychologically and emotionally brutal at times. It's operatic in its scale. It's also very surreal and psychologically disturbing. A movie that almost is entirely set within the confines of an opulent French restaurant. This story centers on Albert Spica. He's played by Michael Gambon. By the way, if you only know him from when he took over the role of Albus Dumbledore from Richard Harris when he passed away in all of the Harry Potter series of films, I'm going to need you to brace yourself. You are going to be shocked. He's a crude, sadistic gangster who holds court at the restaurant every night, abusing the staff, humiliating his refined wife, Georgina, who's played by Helen Mirren, in front of all the other dinner guests. As Albert flaunts his power, Georgina begins a secret affair with a quiet, bookish patron under the watchful eyes of the restaurant's loyal staff, especially the reserved but very noble chef Richard, played here by Richard Bowinger. Directed by Peter Greenaway, the film is a dark, gothic fable wrapped in decadence. It's an allegory about gluttony and control and violence and rebellion. With striking cinematography, you have Baroque set design, a gorgeous, haunting score by Michael Nyman. The film is really going to challenge some people. For example, there are scenes in the restaurant all taking place within the same evening, but based on where the characters are within the restaurant, not only the color of their clothing, but sometimes also the design and style changes. The movie features a grand theatrical style with the daily menus as title cards splashed on the screen. You've got rich symbolism, and if you follow my advice and you treat this more like a kind of dark fable or a fairy tale, well, then you know how most of those end. Gruesome, but satisfying. You know, I saw this back in 1989, and there's really no words that I have to describe that particular experience because there wasn't anything like it before this. There really hasn't been anything like it after this. It was a totally immersive, bizarre experience, and I loved every minute of it. This is not for the faint of heart. The cook, the thief, his wife, and her lover really pushes the boundaries here. It's art house experimental meets psychological thriller, but if you're up for it, it's an amazing film. Number 4 is Rent-A-Pal from 2020. This is an indie psychological thriller about loneliness, dependency, and the dangerous power of human connection, either real or imagined. It's very creepy and also quietly tragic. This is set in 1990, and the story centers on David, who's played by Brian Landis-Folkens. He's a socially awkward bachelor in his 40s. He spends most of his days caring for his elderly mother, who suffers from dementia. Desperate for companionship, David uses a video dating service, and so he spends a lot of time combing through different VHS tapes of potential matches. And then while at the agency's office one day, he notices a very strange-looking videotape called Rent-A-Pal, and he decides to take it home and watch it. The tape features Andy, played by Will Wheaton, a friendly, upbeat guy who talks directly to the camera. Not unlike a version of Mr. Rogers, he's offering kind words and conversation to whoever is watching. At first, David laughs this off, but as the isolation deepens, he starts to treat Andy as a real friend, someone who understands his frustrations and validates his feelings. Gradually, the line between fantasy and David's reality begins to blur. His growing attachment to Andy threatens his chance at genuine human connection, and he starts to spiral into obsession and paranoia. This is directed by John Stevenson. Rent-A-Pal is a slow burn kind of character study. It mixes some of the retro nostalgia, but also it's got some psychological horror in there as well. The film captures the loneliness of caregiving and the seduction of artificial comfort, all anchored by very unsettling performances. Will Wheaton, in particular, is a very eerie character here, and the tightrope walk of are the odd moments from the tape an indicator that Andy is something supernatural versus just a man's heartbreaking loneliness and the effects of that isolation on him. All of that is really nicely balanced. It's a much better movie than I ever hear people talk about, and I think it deserves a deeper fan base. At number 3 is Red, White, and Blue from 2010. Now, please do not get this confused with the historical drama from 2020 that has the exact same name. It stars John Boyega as a London police officer who founds the Black Police Association. There's also a 2023 short film of the same name if you go searching for it. And really, frankly, the same goes for the Netflix romantic comedy Red, White, and Royal Blue from 2023. None of those are the films that I want to highlight. This one is very different. Helms from writer-director Simon Rumley, and it was released in 2010. This film is unflinching, emotionally raw, and deeply unsettling. It's a slow-burn psychological thriller that unfolds like a series of 3 character studies before descending into a brutal revenge film with a lot of moral ambiguity. Set in Austin, Texas, this film follows 3 deeply damaged individuals whose lives all tragically intersect. Erica, who's played by Amanda Fuller, is a young woman drifting from one meaningless sexual encounter to another. She's detached from the world and carrying emotional scars that aren't immediately visible. Then there's Nate, who's played by Noah Taylor, quiet, intense man with a military background. And then there's Frankie, played by Mark Center, a wannabe rock star whose connection to Erica sets the stage for an explosive confrontation. The film is both intimate and shocking. It's not a traditional thriller. It's deliberately paced, emotionally complex, and really confrontational in its depiction of pain and consequence. Red, White, and Blue is not for the faint of heart, but for those drawn to psychological realism, some moral complexity, and also it has some hardcore violence. It's an unforgettable experience. I don't want anyone going into the comments and saying, why didn't you warn us how intense this movie is? Consider this your warning. It is brutal. If you do decide to see it, you're going to find a really harrowing, haunting story about 3 terrible people, but the end showcases so much more than you realized. And you might find yourself thinking back and then reevaluating everything that you've just seen. Number 2 is The Zone of Interest from 2023. This was recommended by several viewers, and I'm so happy that they mentioned this one, and I'm really happy I gave it a watch. Chilling in its restraint and devastating in its implications. The Zone of Interest is not really a psychological thriller, but more, I would say, a psychological drama that explores evil with a quiet, almost clinical precision. This is directed by Jonathan Glazer. It was loosely inspired by the novel by Martin Amis, and it takes place in World War II. It's not focused on the horrors inside the concentration camp. We've seen that in countless movies before. Instead, it's much more focused on what's outside the walls of the camp. Rudolf Haas, who's portrayed here by Christian Friedel, he's the commandant of Auschwitz. He lives with his wife Hedwig, who's played by Sandra Hüller, and their children in a pristine house with pool, gardens, just steps away from the camp's perimeter. The family leads an eerie kind of normal life. They're gardening, hosting guests, raising their children. Meanwhile, the unspoken atrocities on the other side of the wall are ever present. You hear them, but they are never directly seen. The movie really sets you up for this in a pretty striking way. It really just starts for an extended period of time in darkness so that you can begin to hear some of the background noises, the birds, the wind through the trees. That really sets you up and lets you know just how important sound is going to be in this film. The film unfolds in long static takes and measured silences, really detailing routine and domestic life. But beneath the surface lies a meditation on moral detachment and complicity, and how ordinary people can live in comfort while atrocities occur in plain sight. The Zone of Interest is not a traditional Holocaust film. It avoids direct depictions of violence, instead opting just for atmosphere, very specific sound design, and an implication to explore the psychological and ethical void of its characters. It's disturbing not for what it shows, but for what it doesn't, and how easily that cruelty can just become background noise. Now, if you're a narcissist or you have sociopathic tendencies, in other words, you go home from work every night and you kick puppies for the fun of it, yeah, this movie may not really resonate with you, but I think for everyone else, if you have sort of an innate ability to feel compassion and to recognize the suffering of others, it's going to have a real impact on you. And at number 1 is Strange Darling from 2023. This movie reframes the serial killer through fragmented storytelling and a deliberate refusal to give the audience a lot of stable ground to stand on. This was shot on 35mm in rural Oregon, and the film follows two people locked in a violent encounter. Their identities and their intentions gradually revealed like peeling away the layers of an onion through a non-linear six-chapter structure. So expect this one to loop backward and forward in time, forcing the viewer to reevaluate what they've previously seen. What begins as something intimate quickly unravels into something feral, and the shift from seduction to terror feels quite disorienting. Visually, this film pits its sort of pastoral beauty with sudden violence. You've got fields and quiet cabins and empty roads that are all rendered with a lot of care, creating a natural calm that makes all the eruptions of brutality even the more shocking. There's also a lot done here with ambient noises, and the score is also really good. At its core, and I'm being intentionally vague, is less about plot and more about power. Who holds it, who loses it, and how quickly control can shift in a moment of vulnerability. Willa Fitzgerald delivers a fantastic performance. I really liked her as the young Madeline Usher in Mike Flanagan's Netflix series, The Fall of the House of Usher in 2023, but here she's just riveting and fragile and commanding. Kyle Gallner embodies a threat without ever really slipping into cliche. Strange Darling, it's just not a conventional thriller. It's jagged, it holds the cards close to the vest, and it's also deliberately destabilizing. This was written and directed by J.T. Molnar, and its unease comes as much from its structure as from the violence. Now, no, I'm not going to get into any spoilers whatsoever. I do just want to say that a lot of the ending of this movie happens to hinge on one long static shot. And while Zeberg's song Better the Devil plays over that shot, and I think as a director, it's a very bold and unflinching move to stay with that shot, and it's a great one. I shouldn't have to say this, but I feel like I have to. This is a movie that's much better going into as cold as possible. If all you know of this movie is this vague sort of description that I've just given you, you'll be just fine. Please don't look it up. It is a haunting film. It's one I think about often. And as I've said before, if a movie can do that, it's a keeper. Well, that will do it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this look at 10 underrated psychological thrillers that I really just love so much. And I hope you go and check them out, and I hope you enjoy them too. Please let me know in the comments what you thought. Please hit the like and subscribe button as well. As always, it really helps out the channel. Until next time, everyone, stay curious and stay scared.